you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? I am one of those.
Welcome to the Anarcology podcast. I'm Sean Swain, anarchist prisoner Sean Swain, and this is episode 5, dragging stones up the side of the pyramid. So we're going to be deconstructing crapatalism, but before we get to that, we should probably recap where we've been so far in terms of our deconstructions. We visited how potty training thoroughly indoctrinates us through humiliation, shame, and guilt, and how we're controlled even after we forget the experience of it. And it makes us useful to the larger system. Again, mind over matter. The system doesn't mind and we don't matter. And then school, in the last episode, we talked about how we're captive for over a decade and we're bombarded with bullshit so that we can be indoctrinated to show up on time, to defer to others, to suck it up and perform meaningless, busy work, to learn our place. We accept what teachers say about our aptitude, and we learn to chase external validation in the form of grades, rather than seeking our own internal pleasure as to how we feel about our work. This thoroughly mind fucks us and prepares us to be exploited in the workplace. And so now we arrive at a critique of the larger capitalist system. But before we go into capitalism, I have to start with this disclaimer, because every time you go into the critique of capitalism, somebody always says, well, wait a minute, socialism isn't any better. Or they say, wait a minute, communism isn't any better. And they say, look at the Soviet Union. Look at Cuba under Fidel Castro. Look at Venezuela. And that's all good and fine. Okay. But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about socialism or communism. We're talking about capitalism. And just because I'm saying capitalism sucks, it doesn't mean that I'm advocating for some other ism. So I think it's important to share with you now that, and I would suggest that socialism and capitalism are two sides of the same coin, talking about two paths that lead to the same general destination. In capitalism, people with their economic power use the advantage they have to gain control of politics and to gain control of the social engine of society. In socialism, you have people who topple the government and then use their political power to consolidate the power over the economy and the culture. So in both systems, you have a handful of privileged assholes who run your entire world. I would suggest that this speaks to the outcomes in any economic system. It works as a one-size-fits-all. With any system that lasts long enough, a handful always find a way to cheat, to get an advantage. They find a way to corrupt it. And nobody ever tries to get an advantage in order to give it away. People with advantages get the advantages to use them, to increase them. They want their kids to rule yours, to hire yours, to influence yours. Everybody generally wants to be the few at the top and not the many at the bottom. So every economic system, whether it's capitalism, socialism, or even, feudalism, there are the few at the top and the many at the bottom. I would say that the only difference between capitalism and the other economic systems is what I would call the Bill Gates unicorn factor. And when I talk about that, what I'm saying is that in capitalism, there's a new cheat that comes along more rapidly than in most of those other systems. Perhaps every generation, there's a handful of folks at the bottom who can find a way to displace the handful of folks at the top. And because this happens so rapidly, because we see this happen, all of us at the bottom who have a dream and a garage think that we can be the ones who launch the next Microsoft. and it keeps us cheering for the system as it rolls along. You know, we all believe that we might just be that next unicorn. The problem is we're all shitty at math. We don't realize that our odds of radical economic success are probably lower than our odds of getting struck by lightning, or dying in a car wreck within 5 miles of home, or having an airliner accidentally drop its toilet payload on our houses in a flyover, something called blue ice. If you haven't heard about this, Google it. Oh, it's crazy. So crapitalism is a system that really serves the few, while the many serve the system. But even worse than that, the very foundation of crapitalism is legalized robbery. It's the right of those who own the means of production to rob the workers of the value of their labor. So what crapitalism calls profit is really nothing more than stolen wages. And we can prove that. So Bumblebee, are you ready to participate in a theoretical scenario that's going to be earth-shattering and life-changing and ultimately prove that crapitalism is robbery?
Sure.
Are you ready for that? Okay. So here's the scenario. I'm rich, and I've inherited all my money from my rich dad, and I've done nothing my whole life. Okay? I know nothing about nothing. I smoke pot out of a bong and I play video games. But you are the world's premier chocolate expert, and I've decided I want to go in the chocolate business. So what I do is hire you. Now, we're not going to talk about what your salary is yet. We're going to talk about that later, okay? But don't forget about that. We haven't talked about your salary yet.
Okay.
So you have to get my business going. So the first thing you do, maybe find a place like a factory to get working, right?
Right.
So how much does that cost? Let's say you go out and you find me a factory. Give me how much money it's going to cost me to get this factory going. What do you think?
I have no idea. I'm horrible with numbers. I don't know. Let's just
You're a chocolate expert. I have a calculator. You can't trick me.
25,000. I'm not sure.
Excellent.
I hope I don't
So-
have to do any calculations because I'm horrible when it comes to
No, I
numbers.
got it.
Okay.
I got it. Okay. So now we also have to get the ingredients crap that goes into the candy bars, right? So you go and get that. How much does that cost?
I don't know.
Give me
I
a
guess
number.
let's say 2,000.
Okay. And that includes the wrappers and all that shit too. We're just going to include all that together.
Okay.
Still 2,000. Okay. And we're going to need transportation to get this to the market. So we're going to need a truck to put this in. How much is that going to run me?
I guess let's say 2,500.
Okay. Well, you got me buying a really crappy truck, I think. But okay, that's fine. Truck. So that comes out to $29,500 is the startup cash. Now, again, we have to keep in mind this doesn't include your pay. That's the one variable that's missing, right?
Right.
And we'll just say that you're the only worker, just to simplify all this. So you go plug everything in and you run things down the assembly line and you get all the candy bars made and packaged up and tossed in the truck and you take them to the market, right? That's where you're at. You're at the market. And so I've told you to sell, because I don't know anything, I'm an idiot, but I tell you to sell the candy bars for $1.50 a piece, right?
Okay.
So that's the price tag you have on all these candy bars, and you're sitting there. Now, the guy in the vendor spot next to you is selling candy bars, and they're selling candy bars for $1.25, and they got candy bars flying off the shelf. You have no candy bars being sold. Does that surprise you that you're selling candy bars for $1.50 and you can't sell a single candy bar because the people next to you sell them for $1.25.
Right.
You would expect that, right?
Right.
Okay. So what this demonstrates is that it's the consumer that decides the value of a product.
Right.
That makes sense, right? Because you can put any price tag you want on our shit. It's not going to sell unless that price tag corresponds to what the consumer thinks it's really worth. You with me?
Mhm.
Okay. So at some point, you're probably going to call me and be like, look, we're not selling any candy bars because the asshole next to me sells his for $1.25. And you're going to try to probably convince me to sell the candy bars for less.
Right.
I give you permission to just put the price tag on it. So what are you going to sell the candy bars for? It's up to you.
I guess $1.10.
Excellent. You're going to undercut your competition in the stall next door. So
Right.
now all the candy bars fly off the shelf, right? Because you're undercutting your competition next door. And you have valued the product where the consumer says, yeah, that's worth $1.10. And so you sell all the candy bars and you got a pocket full of cash and you come back to see me. And you've got $50,000 in your pocket right now that you got from those candy bars. Now, check this out. The consumer collectively decided that everything we put into all of this was worth 50 grand to them. That's what they've decided. That's what they valued all this at. So if we take the 50 grand, I'm going to do the math here. I have a calculator. Don't worry, I'm good at this. We take the 50 grand and we subtract the 25,000 that I spent on the factory, and we subtract the 2,000 that I spent on the ingredients, and I subtract the 2,500 I spent on the crappy truck you got me. It had to be crappy for just 2,500. We end up with $20,500. Now, what does that $20,500 represent that's left over?
I don't know. I guess the profit?
Well,
Or
that's what I would call it, right?
right.
But what is the only variable that we haven't put the price tag on yet that went into the candy bars? What's the only thing we
salary.
haven't paid for? Yes, your wages for the work you put into this. Now, we've got $20,500 left over right now, and we have your labor unaccounted for. What did the consumer decide your labor was worth?
I don't know. Am I supposed to pick a number of what like my salary would be?
Well, we have $20,500 left over.
Right.
That's what's left over right now.
Right.
And there's only one variable left unaccounted for, and that's your labor.
Right.
$20,500 and your labor. So what was your labor worth according to the consumer?
I guess whatever's left, that 25 that's left.
Yeah. $20,500 is what the consumer decided your labor was worth. So you come back to me with $20,500 after all the other expenses, and I hand you 10 grand, and I put the rest in my pocket, and I say, go make me some more chocolate. Isn't that robbery?
I mean, it's not nice.
The value of your labor, according to the consumer, was $20,500. It's the only variable unaccounted for. So that's your money.
Mhm.
That's the value of your sweat that you put into making these candy bars. And I just took 10 grand of it, handed you 10 grand, and said that's your salary. So capitalism is robbery. The only time anybody ever makes a profit is the profit coming from the owner robbing the worker of the value of their labor. That's where profit comes from. It's a way of legalizing robbery so that the people who already have money and already own the means of production can use their leverage and get you to take a job and come crawling to them and agreeing to get robbed. And that's why your salary is always less than what the value of your labor actually is. So in capitalism, the only time profit ever happens is at the expense of the worker. Yeah. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start babbling again. Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Yes, of course.
The connection was that the money that's left over is what's due to you, and you don't really receive it because that's how capitalism works. So this is a general law related to capitalism and how it operates. Profit is only ever derived by the capitalist by stealing payment earmarked by the consumer to go to the workers for the value of their labor. Therefore, profit is always theft. So if we back away and take a wider view, we see that from birth, through potty training, through public schools, we've been shaped by powerful forces to accept our place, to be exploited and robbed by others, and to accept it. If we look at it this way, we can see an accumulation of trauma, of forces pushing onto us to distort us. And we can begin to explore perhaps how all of this has harmed us and toxified us, like a steady drip of radiator fluid into our bowls of experience. Remember the bowls? Our collection of experience that makes us who we are? Well, yeah. So this is trauma. We'll explore that deeper in future episodes, but we have to get back to the topic of capitalism because we haven't finished that critique. Let's keep in mind that it's the goal of the capitalist to maximize profits. That's to say that whoever is in charge of a company is responsible for squeaking out every possible dime for the company. If a CEO isn't doing that, that CEO won't have a job for long. And we now know that profit only ever comes from skimming what's really owed to the workers. So maximizing the profits really means squeezing the workers. So you aren't just shaped to serve a system where you're expected to get robbed. You serve a system where those in power over you plot and conspire daily to maximize how much they can rob you. So now that we've established that, let's think for a moment what the ultimate success of the capitalist would look like. Let's imagine a scenario where the capitalist has maximized profits, has squeezed every available penny out of the worker. Well, what would that world look like? I can imagine workers reduced to living in shabby dwellings and wearing shabby clothes and having just enough food to survive. I mean, dead workers don't produce, so there's always a minimum that the worker must be given. But when the capitalist reduces the workers to that absolute minimum, does that look like anything we've maybe seen before? What about chattel slavery? Isn't that what maximized profits would look like? So capitalism, reaching its perfect expression, is the reduction of a vast labor force to slavery. Slavery is what maximized profits looks like, the perfect representation of capitalism in its purest state. So I would suggest that it's no coincidence that the one country that was the engine of the capitalist world made its greatest advances while engaging in slavery for hundreds of years. Slavery, then, is just a natural progression in capitalism, one that it's always moving toward, one that it's always aiming at. So, if you're focused on how far back in the rearview mirror the plantation is, you're failing to notice how close the next one is up ahead. As a general rule, if you're not currently playing golf with billionaires, when we do arrive at the next plantation, your kids are likely the ones picking the cotton. More than ever before, we have concentrated wealth in the hands of the few. And that means more and more of us are dragging stones up the side of someone else's pyramid for food rewards. The last statistics I saw, about 5% of the population owned almost 90% of the wealth in the world, leaving the other 95% of us, the vast majority of us, to fight each other over the scraps. So you might be thinking right now that you need to find some way out of this. And so you imagine yourself starting a business or winning the lottery or maybe slinging dope. I don't know. But if you do that, you're only really trading places with someone else. You now play some other new role in the system that pits all of us against one another. So now you're the foreman or the slave master rather than the stone dragger. And that means you're still a slave in a fundamental way, because you can't imagine yourself without this system. You're still shackled to it, and it's still distorting you and causing you trauma. You're still chasing paper, as the prison phrase goes. Paper, money, pieces of currency with slave owners' faces on them. Just an observation here. You're not liberated if you're using currency that someone else is printing. You're only truly liberated if you're the one with the printing press cranking out the money that everyone else is chasing. Or better yet, if you're the one with the hammer smashing the printing press that's printing out the money that everyone's chasing. It reminds me of a line from a Rage Against the Machine song. They said, "Fuck a G-Ride, I want the factories that are making them." And Rage is awesome, but I would disagree with them on this point. I would say, fuck the factory too. I don't know that I want to be in charge of a factory where other people have to go in and perform labor that I myself would not want to do. I think the slave ship Amistad is a terrible thing to be shackled to, whether you're the cargo or the captain. And so, I guess that brings us back to the questions that concern anarchology. What's freedom? What are the forces that oppose it? And how do we obtain it? And I would suggest to you that just from this brief overview, that capitalism isn't just a force that opposes our freedom, but that it also serves as a kind of invisible framework that forms the bars of the cage that we all inhabit. We all live and struggle and die inside that cage that capitalism creates. And most of us don't think beyond that. Well, maybe until now. And so that about does it. I hope you tune in to the next episode when we discuss government and how it really operates as a force of non-freedom. And until then, this is anarchist prisoner Sean Swain for the Anarcology podcast on XV3, the Red Zone. If you're listening, you are the resistance.